How is my audio?
Working.
That doesn't
like a domestic
God,
dream.
I was so excited. I just haven't been going for so long, and now I'm back where in the land of carpet as opposed to the land of reverb. And I was just really excited to show off my great audio. And I don't know, Steve, it's
it started
not what I was going for.
It started weak, but it's getting better with every word.
Stop. It's like your audio is unmuted. I'm like, all right.
Audible. What else do you want?
It's right there in the name. What else do you want? I mean, this is like lowest possible praise. I should sound a lot better than 2 weeks ago.
You sound great. You do. It was really just that first word that had both me and Steve pausing, I think.
All right. Now I don't know if I'm being gaslit or not.
This time, no.
This time, no. Next time, yes. How are you all? That's it. It's good to be. Good to be back. Good to be back.
Good. Welcome back.
Yeah, back in the litter box.
I've been around for the podcast, so it's also nice to be here. Sometimes my Mondays have gotten a little busy at this time slot, so yeah.
Well, welcome back to our a regular. All right, so we actually now, do I want to kick off with the topic already? I feel like this is. I don't want to rush into our topic. It feels like
we promised a good cold open that was like the worst cold open that's ever cold opened, and then getting right into it at 1 minute after the hour is like it's.
Well, I feel that very on
brand.
Like
a hallucination, Brian. I think.
Very on brand. Adam and I were at an Oakland Ballers game over the weekend.
That's right.
And I feel, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, because we were sitting in at different spots. I feel that that your progeny was very close to being the fan of the game. Am I right about that? I feel like they were looking for a fan of the game in your section, and I'm like, this can't end well. I feel.
Yeah, they were right there next to us. I brought my little league team in, and one of the kids suddenly was on the field with his little brother, not my kid, but another one. And then they got to run the bases afterwards. So for fans of the podcast and the baseball episode, go to the Oakland Ballers with their kids, I guess.
Yeah, you can actually run all of the bases. Unlike, did you see that John Fish and the A's were stopping at third base in Sacramento? It just feels like they literally can't even run the bases properly.
Anyway, it's amazing.
If the team is doing bad, do you say that they're bombing, or is that like a bad joke?
Well, they are the Ballers, not the Bombers.
Oh, Ballers, not the Bombers. I just couldn't. Maybe your audio is not that good. I take it back. No, I'm just joking.
You're blaming my audio for that? I just feel like we have an entire podcast episode about the Ballers. I mean,
Steve says it's his favorite.
I'm doing meta art about how the fact that humans can misunderstand a text doesn't mean that they're useless. Just like if an LLM can't.
Very meta.
Bring it right back into the topic. Actually,
are you going to be hallucinating a lot of this episode? Can I just know in advance? Am I going to have to ask you for?
Yeah.
Could you give me 10 more names of the baseball team that you think you could be?
Yeah. 3 + 5 is 12.
There we go. There you go. On it.
There's 6 R's in strawberry.
Exactly. Okay, we're good to go. All right. Well, that is as good a segue as we're going to get. So, Steve, we are talking about this blog entry that you wrote last week.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a hot tamale. I was a little bit surprised. I went back and listened to our pragmatic LLM usage with Nicholas Carlini. Which, okay, Adam, when do you think that was? Without looking, do you know when that was?
I'd say almost a year ago to the day.
It is actually it's close. It's like 10 months ago. So yeah, you're very good. You got a good intuition for time.
There we go.
I felt it was like much more recent than that. But it's not. It was a while ago. But it was interesting to go like re-listen. So I feel like we have been pretty modern on this issue for a while. So Steve, I thought your blog entry was very neutral. No, I mean, neutral is the wrong word. The dreaded neutral zone.
Measured.
Measured.
Yeah.
Yes. Even of temperament.
Yeah. It's great because I wrote it mostly because I'm being driven insane lately, and I felt like I needed to just like vomit some words out about it. So that's extra good because I mean, obviously, I think there's some meta issues around its reception and everything else, but I appreciate that y'all both thought it was reasonable.
Okay, so the exactly audio
audible
blog entry,
lots of words, yeah.
Lots of words. Okay, so the title is "I am disappointed in the AI discourse." So Do you want to describe a bit? What prompted you to write this? What prompted this disappointment?
So basically, like I have historically, most, I don't even know if I should necessarily say this exactly, but let's put it this way. Many people that I know and respect are pretty vocally anti-AI. And I found the things they said to be relatively reasonable. And like when ChatGPT came out, I definitely didn't say, do you know who Steve Klabnik is? I typed like real questions in there that, and it gave me answers that I thought were fine, but also clearly made hilarious mistakes sometimes. And I kind of went, this is a fun party trick, but like, I'm not totally sure about a lot of things about this. And so I kind of just like sort of put it away. But an interesting thing, and I sort of talked about some of this publicly, but not all of it, is I told my mom's boyfriend about this, and he works, or did work, he actually retired this year, but he like worked for doing like a tar plant, like industry stuff. And part of his job is like sending reports about how the plant does to like other things. And so he was really curious, like, what does this thing know about like tar production and like sand and physical things I don't understand because I'm a computer programmer. And so there's been like in the like 2 years or whatever that's been like since that happened, there's been this really weird like kind of thing where, he has had very many like measured and reasonable takes about it. Cause like I'd ask him, my programmer friends are all like, oh, it hallucinates and therefore it's useless. And I'd be like, what do you think about the fact that it's not accurate? And he'd be like, well, here's the deal. It's like, that's my job. He's like, I love editing text and I hate writing it. And so like, if I need to do a report, I find it's faster to like ask it what to do. And it's like 75% right and 25% wrong, but it's my job to fix that 25%. And I can do the editing of the text faster than I can do the like writing on its own because it's not as painful to me. And so just like, it's chill, like whatever, like computers are always making mistakes and like, that's fine. Like tools don't, they're not a problem. And so,
to be clear, you had this conversation with him 2 years ago, and he started using ChatGPT after this conversation.
He started using it. Yeah, basically, I was like, I told my mom, like, by the way, this computer thing came out, and like, I totally didn't ask it if it knew about me, and it totally did or did not. I'm just being silly because I'm sometimes like, I feel weird about the fact that I'm like a public figure in some ways. And so,
is this just a really long way for us to acknowledge your blue sky, blue check? Is this what?
Exactly. This is really about the blue check. Definitely.
I just told you we were not, Adam. This is what I said. We're just not going to get past it. We got to just hit it right at the top, and then we'll be done with it.
Just get it out of our systems.
I've been rewatching 30 Rock recently, and there's a scene where Jerry Seinfeld says to Alec Baldwin, like, oh, I was in Europe vacationing in the country that only rich people know about. And like, that's kind of like the way I feel about the blue check thing. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I have it, but I can't tell you about, our parties and the checks they send me and all those other things. So anyway, like, he had started using it immediately because he was just really enthralled with like, I can ask this thing anything and it spits something out that's sensible. And he was curious, like, this is a thing made by computer people. What does it know about my industry and the stuff that I know and things like that? And so, so like he continued to use it and found it interesting. And so I had this like weird optimism from a like non-programmer person, and then all of this like anti stuff from programmer people. And that's like fine, but it's like weird that the programmer people are like, I don't know, just like it started to like mess with my head a little teeny bit. But then like as time went on, it was sort of like I decided at one point that, if I'm going to be a hater, I like to be an informed hater. And so
there you go.
I was
this is the most earnest interest. It comes from like, I need to hate this thing better.
Yeah. And like, I knew I'd tried this thing 2 years ago, and people are always saying stuff gets better. And like, sometimes people are right and sometimes people are wrong, but I was like, I haven't checked in on this a while. I should like, see what's up. And then like, I was like, oh, so I had specifically for reasons that involve JJ. There you go, Adam. Because of JJ, the JJ tutorial that I've been writing, I really wanted to have.
Are we gonna get the chime? Or are we gonna get the
the minutes until the JJ?
It's a
MLG horn.
Yeah,
a really nice thing about JJ is the coloring in the console, and I think it matters and is important and is good. And in my tutorial, it's all black and white because there's no highlighting for JJ. So I got this idea that like in the second version of my tutorial that I'm working on, I would like to transpile the like codes from the terminal, whose name I'm totally forgetting right now, which is embarrassing. ANSI escape codes like to CSS, and then I would like have coloring in my terminal, and that'd be cool. And so I went on this little side project. And you know what's like not very fun? Writing an ANSI escape codes to CSS compiler. And I see all these people talking about how good code is at it. And so I decided, like, what the heck? I'll just throw it at ChatGPT. And so I was like, I'm going to be extra lazy about it. I'm not even going to like describe the problem. I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm trying to turn ANSI codes into CSS. What you got for me? And it was like, oh, cool. And started like reproducing the ANSI table correctly. And I was like, oh, whoa, this is kind of neat. But it like also didn't do like a fantastic job, but it was like doing a good enough job that I thought it was kind of cool. And so I was just like messing with it because I was like, this is actually better than I expected already. And like, it's missing important cases. It's not really doing anything right, but like, that's fine. And so I started using it for a couple other things. And then, that was never like actually finished because it was sort of like a side project at this point. So I don't have a ton of time to work on this stuff, but, eventually I was like, I'm really curious. They say these new models are way better. And like, then the one I'm using is for free. And so like, I can cough them up $20 once, just like play with this for a little while. And so I asked to do the same problem. And it gave me like a completely different algorithm for doing the thing. Like the free versions model was giving me like, go through every single byte in like a for loop with equals and match statements. And the newer model was giving me like regex search and replace, which I know you cannot parse the regexes and all that stuff. And so I hate to even bring it up, but like, it was so interesting to me that the two models gave me completely different outputs, which is the thing that should not be surprising. But like, when you just don't ever use a thing, you're just like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But I just literally never thought about it before because I never really considered these things. And so I continue to just like kind of play with stuff. And so then like, the stuff has been heating up as it gets more and more serious, because I do think it's getting more and more serious. And that's a whole part of this discussion. But like the thing that kind of broke me a little bit, and this is one area where I think I did sort of a poor job in writing, and we were talking in the channel before the podcast started about this in some ways, is like a big criticism I got was I was like not engaging with the like ethical outcomes of the circumstance, because people felt like when I was talking about, so I thought that the deep learning thing was kind of interesting. And frankly, I like to ask ChatGPT sometimes about just random stuff to see what it gives me. And so I had like typed in, I don't remember what it was, like, tell me about this thing, and like do a deep research on it, because I think it's kind of interesting. And so it's like searching the web. Here's like the 6 web pages I'm looking at. And I was like, all right, cool. And I tab over to Blue Sky and I see someone who I really technically respect reposting this person who apparently is a sci-fi author who is like, LLMs cannot search the web. They don't do that. They can't do that. Stop saying they can do that. It's fake. They just make stuff up. And this is the point that like this sort of like broke me. And what I was trying to get by talking about this in the post is like, everyone wants to argue whether or not a search engine or not. And like, that's fine, I guess. But like, my point was not to say like this person is wrong and stupid. The point is that like I have one tab where ChatGPT is searching the web for whatever definition of that is, and you can argue about the details, and that's fine or whatever. But just like versus someone who says like, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, do I exist in a shared reality with other people? And like, I say that in like kind of a joking way, but also sort of in a realistic way where, I don't know, just like I think it's also sort of plays in a lot of this is that like it's sort of weird and tough times, and people are feeling stressed about just like life and everything. The shared reality is like a complicated question at this point in some ways. And so I just kind of was like, okay, I need to like talk about this and get something out of me, because like I feel like I'm seeing people that are super pro this technology make arguments I find ridiculous, but also people that are very anti really ridiculous. And I'm not normally a like in the middle kind of person. I don't know if you both know this about me or not, but like I'm generally very allergic to that.
Oh no, this was fun. Like I'm going to alienate absolutely positively everyone. It's just
and so, what better way to, deal with your lack of shared reality than to have a ton of people yell at you on the internet about it. And so that was kind of like why I wrote the post, was sort of just like, I know I need to like sort of work through these things in some capacity, and like a writing helps your thinking tremendously, and it helps my thinking tremendously. And so my intention was kind of like, I want to set the stage, and I want to say that like I intend to like go through this whole thing, because I think one thing that makes it really hard to talk about is there's like a million different ways to talk about this topic, and so there's no way you can fit that all in one blog post. And so I just like am like, all right, I'm going to say that I intend to start this discussion, and I'm going to keep it meta, and I'm going to keep it like, I'm not trying to like say anyone's right or wrong. I'm just like, I want to work through this, and I feel a little crazy. And like, I wish that I feel like I feel like I can't even talk about it because people get so upset. And then everyone just got mad at me. And so that's like fine. Many people did not get mad at me too, but like, that was sort of the broader like aspects of it is just like and so I kind of feel like I wish I'd written a better post. I'm not entirely sure that I like my post a ton, but it at least got the thing rolling. And now I kind of like have to do more of this work, and that's what I wanted to do anyway. So it's kind of cool in that respect. But so anyway, I guess that's like the broad stage, like that's the broad setting in which the post happened, and sort of like the kind of like backstory, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's always hard because you never know you necessarily like the discussion that you get are always the people that are kind of motivated to have that discussion, and you never kind of like there can often be a big, because to me like your post represents pretty mainstream thinking. I don't think it's that controversial, and I get that there are people for whom that is very, very controversial. I do think, and Janet's making this point in the chat, I think that there's a real peril. I would encourage all potential haters to do as Steve has done and use the thing enough to know exactly what you're hating and why. Because it would, I do think that it would, I think some people there are arguments out there, and Steve, after you kind of said this, I went into, you mentioned that you'd broken lobsters, which, I mean, do they give you a t-shirt for that? I mean, I'm not sure what but with the sheer number of comments on lobsters, so I did go into that lobsters thread. I'm like, wow, this Steve was really not exaggerating. There are a lot of comments here. And I do think that it behooves people to actually dig into this stuff, because I saw, do you read Josh Marshall at all? Talking Points memo, Adam or Steve?
No,
you guys read?
No.
Okay.
Josh Marshall about it, but I don't read it.
I like Josh Marshall. An interesting kind of pundit. And he had this post today being like, I am writing a piece on AI, but I have never used it. So I used it this morning and it started hallucinating on these two things or whatever. And it's like, okay, you're writing a piece on AI and you've not used it at all? Like, are you like, maybe why don't you write the piece next week? Why don't you use it this week and then write the piece next week when you've got just a little more underneath you? Because I really do think, and Steve, I don't think I quite realized how, maybe this is just naive on my part, about how polarized some of this stuff was. And I would really caution people about that. There is a bit of a vilification of people that are using this stuff. And I would really caution people off of that position. Because there's but if you're not using the stuff yourself and you're being like, anyone who's using this is, like one of the things I saw that I am still grappling with are the people who are concerned that it is not ethical to use an LLM. And man, that is, I don't think that's a good position. I gotta say, I think that like, if you want to, and I'm sure like the internet is just like bursting into flames right now over this, but I think you've got to be really explicit about that position, because that's the same kind of position that says like, I think it's unethical for you to drive to work. And like, that's not it. Like, I guess I can construct a framework whereby that is the case, but you're also saying it's unethical to drive your mom to the hospital.
Well,
because
it's worth taking apart the ethical concerns, right? Because I think that they are broadly, and correct me if I'm wrong, copyright and environmental, and then maybe also like some big tech. Are there other kind of categories of that ethical concern?
Yeah, Steve, we look to you. I'm sorry to be.
Those are two of the definite large ones. There's also like deep fakes are a big concern, and just general like what I would call like internet of shit concerns of like what happens if we start. The dismissive version of this that's funny, and I'm not trying to dismiss it, is like, what if someone put a lie on the internet? But like there's a difference between quality and quantity, and like quantity is a quality all its own, right? So if there's like more lies on the internet, then like how, what's up with that? There's also concerns as to who is the people that gets the profit off of this.
Right.
I would say those are at least like, and also the I guess the last one that's maybe a little separate is the like job loss that ensues from these things existing. Is the other big one as well. So those are, I would say, like the 5 or 6 like top ethical concerns.
Right. And so I would just separate the ones I had cited as like ethical concerns about using it versus ethical concerns about the broader implications for humanity. That is to say,
there's like production concerns, there's consumption concerns, and there's like utility and or like a societal effect concerns.
That's right. And I guess implicitly by using it, one might feel like you're endorsing some of these other effects, other uses that you're not engaged with, but encourage perhaps other people to. So I would just say, Bryan, I kind of disagree with the sentiment that like you just got to get over it or whatever. Like I think that there may be valid concerns that people have about, say, how these are trained and how they're used and what biases are implied by them. But I also agree with your point emphatically that you got to go experience it to some degree yourself to evaluate those ethical concerns.
Well, and I think you're going to need to separate that out, right? I mean, you can say that, like, I think that we have a society that is too based on the internal combustion engine, and still acknowledge that driving your mom to the hospital is actually an acceptable thing to do.
Yeah.
And
there's
like,
also like, oh, go ahead, Bryan, you should finish what you're in.
No, I think it's actually, I think it's very important. Like, there's a lot of complexity and ambiguity here, and we're going to have to tease these things apart, because when you get into this kind of like, I think this overly reductive stance of, you know, I am kind of playing forward the arbitrary implications of this, and therefore I think any engagement with it is accelerating us towards this path that I kind of have in my mind. I just think you're bringing yourself into lots and lots of one is bringing oneself into lots and lots of unnecessary conflict, and conflict that's going to be very confusing for both parties.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in the place, and again, like I am also a little underread on many of these, or I'm still, again, working through my thoughts on the ethics of all of this stuff overall. But like, I guess there's sort of a related thing that I see happening, which is like, part of my concern about the ethical discussion is that it seems like some people think that if we just say that the ethics are bad hard enough, the genie will go back in the bottle.
Yeah.
And like, my take is like, okay, that's never going to happen. So if we agree that there are problematic ethics, we need to like understand what is actually happening, and the sort of like, don't investigate the thing because it legitimizes it is like not allowing us to prepare to properly have the fights that are going to need to be had about the ethics of how it gets deployed in society. So like, as a specific example of like some of this, there's a big sort of argument about like, is this any different than any other form of automation? And so like, there are some people who sort of believe that like AI in terms of automation is like sort of a special, unique instance of this happening. And there's other people who are like, and I think I'm more on this side, at least currently, like automation has always been taking people's jobs and making productivity gains go to the people who own companies and not the workers of those companies, and like stuff like that. And like, trying to make it special is actually making it more difficult to have the concrete discussions that are needed to like try to right those sorts of wrongs. And so it like becomes a struggle, even when you're sort of like on a similar-ish side. You can end up arguing about stuff that's like not even really like, yeah, like I don't know. That's just like one specific kind of like angle that I'm like particularly interested in. I said something a couple weeks ago that's sort of like a thing that I break with a lot of people who I consider to be on my own side on these sort of issues more broadly is like, I don't know, the ideas of programmers being upset that they're going to be automated out of a job is like kind of massively hypocritical to me. Because like, what do you think our industry has been doing since the inception of our industry?
Yeah,
like,
100%.
Do you think all those secretaries are like upset that we're worried that like our jobs are going to go away? Like, you know,
or clerk,
I mean,
right? I mean, go look at the census from 1890, 1900, 1910, 1920. I mean, it's kind of mesmerizing to look at the census from those censuses, in terms of how people are actually employed.
It is important though. Like I said earlier, quantity is a quality all its own. And so like the idea that every job is going to be automated out into existence, maybe something that is significantly different. But it's just like, those are the conversations I want to have with those kinds of like nuance and like investigating the angles on the problem. And it becomes very difficult when people are like, don't even investigate this at all because it is like not like, it's so bad that you shouldn't even talk about it. And it's like, that's not a thing that I can like agree with. I think there are a lot of problems and a lot of challenges, but I also like, this is why part of like the thing that I got in trouble with is people thought I was like dismissing ethical concerns, because I'm like, I want to know what the thing is before I talk about the ethics of it. And it's not because I think those things are like, you have to know 100% of the thing. Like some people were like, do you need to know how combustion works to understand that a F-150 could run over a child? And I'm like, no, but you do need to know that an F-150 can run over a child to have that discussion. And like there's like a certain level of like, I'm not saying you need to fully understand every aspect, but you do need to like agree. So come back to the shared reality thing. Like we do need to agree on some level of understanding of like what capabilities of a thing are to like know how to talk about the ethics of the tool itself. And like for me, that means on some level there's like, I mean, dialectics, blah, 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 whatever. But like you need to have like, I like to start and not stop with like, can we agree on what this thing is and what it can do? And then talk about the other parts, and then also do the other things. And that's like the part where I struggle with a lot of discussion online about this. Basically.
But how about a straw man argument instead? That's almost as helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the challenge is, Steve, just to answer your question, we emphatically can't agree on what it is. I mean, that's actually part of the problem. Right.
Yeah,
and I think that different people are, and I actually think that like, and, even, and I, Nair in the chat is just definitely singing our love music in terms of like the term AI is really a problem. I think it's deeply problematic, right? Is the person in the chat asking if Frankenstein was an AI. I believe you mean Frankenstein's monster. To be that guy. Just the great Silicon Valley line. It's like, oh, you're one of those guys. When Richard corrects his doctor about Frankenstein's monster. Yes, I'm one of those guys. You mean yin and yang. But I think that you've got to tease these things apart. You've got to, because for example, you called this out in your post, Steve, but like generative art to me is like so not the same thing as having something edit a document for you or offer feedback on a document. Like these things are, and I get like there's some of the underlying tech is in common, but these things are so different. And Adam, it's pronounced flaccid. A lot of people don't know that.
Yes, thought you'd get there.
Of course.
And there are and that's why I go to capabilities first, is because I think that the ethics of generative art are very different than the ethics of Grammarly. Yeah.
Yes.
Even though those are like sort of the same technologies in some level, like the societal impact and who they affect and in what ways are different because of their capabilities.
Totally. And I also think that like I think I completely I do understand that when we kind of tie this into one galactic area of technology, and when some people are like, I don't understand why they're ethical concerns. If you were thinking of this in terms of generative art, you're like, I don't understand how they're not ethical concerns. I think but to me, like when I'm thinking of Grammarly, I think that someone is saying in the chat too about like its general purpose. So it merits many different ethical discussions. I do agree with that, but because it's general purpose, I think you've really got to tease it out and tease it apart, because there are so many different use cases for this. And there are use cases that I think it's going to be hard to argue that you are ethically compromised on some of these use cases. And I guess you can just say
it's hard to argue you're not on other ones. Like just like I don't really currently believe that like using Claude to like generate some tests for me is the same thing as making deep fake revenge porn. Like those are just incredibly different things. And even though if they use like the same math sometimes, that's like a very different set of problems, and they require very different like concerns and considerations.
Now, Steve, I'm using deepfake revenge porn as test cases. So as this, like, where am I in that?
An ethicist nightmare.
Yeah. Exactly.
To investors in Oxide Computer, this is a joke. Yeah.
Right. That's just an Oxide computer, like Oxide computer's a joke. Yeah.
And like as you know, to like sort of make this slightly about you for a second, Brian, like you were telling me, you're like writing up a policy for the company because like it's very interesting because like, different companies have very different positions on whether or not you're allowed to use these tools that come from different like not necessarily even understandings of what they are, but like different risk tolerances and worry about what the impacts of like things are. And so like you're like about to write an RFD around this kind of policies like for Oxide. And so it's like, on some level, it's like very interesting to me what your opinion is, because also like, you in some ways are the person who determines if I am allowed to use this tool at my job and in what way and whatever else. And we've had personal conversations about this at length, but like, that's this sort of like, I was talking to a friend in DMs a couple minutes ago, and he's like, yeah, like I use Copilot and it totally sucks. And I'm like, yeah, and like Claude's way better, but like that also doesn't matter if your job is like you must use Copilot and not Claude. There's like also like this whole thing is just fractal in so many ways. Yeah. It's like very difficult to like have not like 27 different conversations at the same time at the same point. And there's also a weird intersection that goes along with the world is strange right now, which is kind of what someone's getting into in the chat by pointing out like Ben Evans talking about like once AI works, it's just software. Like I'm 39 and I've had some significant life changes lately. And I'm also like wondering to what degree like I am getting old. There's a weird part of me that's like, am I getting conservative or are other people getting conservative? And I'm not on some like ways about technological optimism and like some things like that. And there's also ways around things like, people are like, well, just like, everyone puts AI into everything and they just get free VC money. And someday that crash is going to happen. And then putting AI in your thing. And I'm like, are you talking about 1978 to 1985? Or are you talking about 2025? Because like we already had an entire bust boom cycle in AI like 40 years ago. And like, like it's just like also strange. Like, it's like, yeah, is it 1984? Thank you, James. I think if I remember correctly from your handle, like AI winter, right, is like a thing. And so I'm also coming to terms a little bit with like, I was around for the building of GitHub, but many people who I professionally am interacting with grew up with GitHub because I'm like an old now. And so, there's like also a lot of those kinds of like things that are very like I have some opinions about things like intellectual property that are based in a very like free software, free culture, piracy, pro, like anti-IP kind of like basis that many people who've grown up where their friends are starving artists do not. And like that's kind of an interesting like thing to sort of deal with, is like thinking like, I thought we were all here to like destroy intellectual property, not like reinforce it, because like to me, like Disney profits, not individual small artists off of copyright. Many reasonable people disagree with me on that. And like, so, there's just like a whole pile of also kind of like midlife crisis wrapped up in many aspects of this. Or like, I'm like, I personally care a little bit less about the physical act of writing code that I did 20 years ago. And, many people are like, I don't want a robot to program the computer because I love programming the computer. And I'm like, I kind of want computers to do stuff and I don't care as much about the writing code part. And so I'm kind of naturally predisposed to not be as upset about the idea that like, I'm not generating source code as much. I'm like writing documentation and like doing all that. There's just a billion ways you can take this whole thing. And so, I don't know in what vector of the space, my opinions are or everything else, et cetera. But just like it touches on so many things, it just becomes hard to talk about it because you don't even know if you're talking about the same thing like at all in 12 different ways.
Yeah, and I think you're often not. Oatmeal Dealer, you wanted to raise your hand. You get some thoughts and opinions. You want to jump in here?
Yes. I have a few of those. Do I sound normal?
You sound
audio.
Normal.
Yeah.
I think you sound audible, Steve would say. I think you sound great. I think your audio is
like audible.com.
Exactly.
I just full disclosure before I say anything else, I did see the announcement for this particular cast, and I have 2 pages of opinions that I wrote down with my own God-given hands. So please don't be scared.
We'll be the judge of that.
I'm gonna trim it. Okay. But I have a lot of different things that I've wanted to say so far, but I think the main, I guess, thesis of what I took away from thinking about Steve's article was, one, when a lot of people talk about AI, they're talking about like all of it, right? As like one big thing. Yeah. And they're just trying to answer the question like, okay, is thing good or thing bad? Right.
Yeah.
And I think one like really major like top level way in which that premise is just incorrect is I think like what people think of when they think of AI is closer to a manufacturing process than a product, right? Because there you have to start with materials, right? You have to get your data from somewhere, and who cares where you get it from, right? Like if you're just starting out, you're on the ground floor, like just scrape everything, right? What could go wrong? You have to get your raw materials, and you have to put it through some kind of refining process where you make it into something, right? And I think for most people who are not like really at the top of the pyramid of the people who are making this stuff, to them it's just like data goes in and like big scary computer program comes out, right? And there's not like, I think Steve said something about this where to a lot of people, like using Claude to refactor some modules or something is like, to them it's not morally distinct from deepfake revenge porn, for example.
Yeah, interesting.
But Adam said something about like there are also concerns of when I use this thing, am I, for lack of a more complex term, empowering someone else to do evil later, right?
Yeah.
Because I think like you look at a dichotomy like Claude versus like deepfakes, and those two things are like obviously so distinct, right? Like one of them is generating text and the other one is generating images. But it's like you could have, for example, and I could see this being a realistic scenario. Let's say that there's a company who is using an image classifier neural network to provide early cancer detection, and they're turning around and they're taking some of that R&D from that, and they're making another image classifier that like decides who to blow up with missiles, right? And it's like, oh, if you want to get your early cancer detection, you necessarily have to like enrich and empower the people who are like, we think computers should kill more people, actually. And I think when you start to think of it as a force multiplier before anything else, right? Like, okay, here's this thing, and if you have the thing, you can do a lot more of blank than you could before, right? And some have upsides that obviously outweigh the downsides, like ammonium nitrate, right? Like we all owe our lives collectively from the population explosion, right? To this one thing.
Yeah,
and it's
good
like,
example.
Yeah, sure, it explodes, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's a very good
plenty
example.
of things explode. Plenty of things explode, and also don't allow you to have 8 billion people on one planet. So like, who cares, right?
Yeah.
And then you turn around and I'm crossing my heart 1,000,000 times before I invoke this discourse, but like you have other things like conversations around gun control, right? Where it's like, okay, the thing very clearly is like its purpose is to do a thing that's bad. And like that's a totally different conversation than like thing that is like unilaterally good, right? And I think that with AI, it's like all the meters are just maxed out, right? I think Steve mentioned something like this where everybody seems to either think that like, oh, it's just like the Industrial Revolution, right? It's just like automation. It's totally exactly the same thing. And then there's another camp of people that are like, no, it's this totally new thing that isn't even anything like any other thing that's ever existed, which is like, I mean, that's impossible also. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it reminds me a little bit of like the RFD3 podcast, right? Where I don't remember which one of you was who said this, but it's like, you have no idea like how much damage that one bad hire can do.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, interesting.
And it's like, when you talk about like unleashing, we talk about unleashing as the thing as if we haven't done it already, but like the cat's out of the bag and everything. When you talk about the potential upsides and downsides of a given technology, there's two sets of downsides, right? There's the downsides of using it in good faith, and then there's the downsides from bad actors, right? Because like a car,
that's a helpful dichotomy. Actually, I think it's important,
right,
to distinguish those two.
Because a car is like, you guys brought up like driving your mom to the hospital, right? Well, it's like, yeah, of course, like you drive your mom to the hospital and you emit some amount of CO2 and it warms the planet ever so slightly. And yeah, maybe that is eventually going to kill us. but it's going to kill us like 0.00001%, compared to the rest of the CO2 that's going to kill us.
I had someone come at me for being like, well, don't you think driving your car puts a lot of like, environmental pressure and like, maybe blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, I don't even have a driver's license, man. Like I literally live a relatively car-free life.
Right.
Like, and so like, I'm already on that team, like here actually, like, so.
And it's and another, I don't want to get on a tangent here. I do a little bit, but I'll try not to. Like one thing that a lot of people, because I have 2 cars, for example, I do drive, in fact, and I'm comfortable with the ethical implications of that, because modern internal combustion engines are completely different than like your, like a carbureted engine from the 80s, right? Like if your car is smog exempt, you are the problem. Right.
And
like,
also
those are the vehicles.
Like I get to say I don't even have a driver's license, but when I wanted to get a pizza from a place a little too far to walk away yesterday and I had my girlfriend drive me there, am I actually leaving? I took a fucking I took a Waymo to like go to a doctor's appointment today. Like, am I actually living a car-free life?
Right.
Like, it's like more complicated than just purely.
You did use the new option that allows you to order a gross polluter. So you were able to actually
they give you a discount for that actually. It's cheaper for you because you're, emitting pollution.
Sorry. Well, I think the only other thing I was going to say is like when you talk about the good faith downsides versus the bad faith downsides, it's like the bad faith downsides of a car, for example, is like, okay, a person could just decide to drive their car into a crowd of people,
right?
Which they often do.
And people have, right? It's been used as a weapon.
Yeah, that happened. I think that happened last month, right?
Right.
I couldn't tell you where, but we're around there.
Statistically speaking, it's going to happen. Yeah, right. Exactly. Often enough that.
And I think it's like, to some extent, and this might be a little bit spicy, but even with things like cars, I think there is a little bit of manufactured consent there. Because we need them, right?
Oh,
like
okay.
So you need a car to get around.
Yeah.
And like Henry Ford did his due diligence so that if you want to get from one side of the country for another to another, like you're either flying or driving, right? Those are your 2 options.
When I moved to Austin, I told people I didn't have a car because, to be clear, I also joke like I don't have a license because I lived in New York so long it expired and I didn't notice, and so like it's not because I got a DUI or something.
Yeah. Now you can't fly because you don't have a real ID.
Yeah. Well, I got my passport in that circumstance, but anyway, like people were like, "You don't have a car? Like, how do you get groceries?" I'm like, "The grocery store is a quarter mile away." And they're like, "And so what do you do?" And I was like, "I walk." And they were like, "Whoa!" And that's like, like the ideology of cars and needing them is like such an intense thing for so many people.
No, and I think that's and I think that's kind of like that shares a root cause with like the reason why this particular discourse is like so fragmented and so polarized. Because I think the average person who participates in any discourse like grossly underestimates how different everyone's lives are. But also how similar they are within like these little pockets of like, oh yeah, well, this is New York City. Like none of us drive because we don't hate ourselves. Like what's wrong with you, right?
I can like talk about, oh yeah, I'm so great because I don't have a car. But you know what? I'm in the top 1% of people who fly. Like I was in the top 1% of Delta customers for like 10 years. So, like is not having a car and then getting on a plane 2 times a month, 4 times to go home, I guess too. Like, is that better or worse in terms of like the environmental impact of the thing and my own personal, output or whatever? Like, yeah, just.
And if we're having a conversation about like the ethics of flying, for example, let's just suppose we're doing that. You might come into the discussion like, well, planes are good because they allow me to not use cars, which are bad, right? So planes good because planes equals less cars. And someone might say like, well, you benefit from planes, so of course you would think planes are good.
Yeah. Cars kill more people than planes do. Like
right. And I think that is another thing that I think is like the common thread through all of this is like when you do have these I'll call them technological force multipliers, right? Like they exist as information and then people go and build them and then they go and do a lot of stuff. We talk about the upsides and the downsides as if they're all happening to the same person, right? But that's just like not the case. Like, you have people who are polluting the planet who will be dead by the time it's a problem. You have people who drive cars and maybe like other people die because they drive cars like in a very immediate way, and like the people driving the car are like not subject to this, you know, either through random chance or whatever, you know. And I think a lot of people who think AI is really awesome are coincidentally also people, most of the time, I'll say, I don't know, I may regret that, but like the people who think it's good statistically are more likely to be people who like at least think they're going to benefit from it in some way.
So
right?
I think we actually, good versus bad is, I think, part of the problem too, because I think it's like,
right.
I don't know that I would say
technology is value neutral. You know?
Well, it's useful is the thing. Like it definitely is useful. And I think maybe, Steve, this is some of the cognitive dissonance that you experienced that prompted you to write the blog entry, is that like it is very hard to make the bold claim that it's not useful, because it just means that I mean, Steve, you and I were joking about someone who's like, you know, when one of the many hacker news threads where people were coming in with opinions about Oxide, talking about how like, well, nobody uses this. It's like, well, that's a very easy to disprove, because all you need is like one person that's using this. And I feel that like you just need, when it is useful, and I think it is indisputably useful. I think, you know, one of the things that was interesting is Jenna said in the chat that like the folks that are, you know, how do non-technological people see this? And I got to tell you, I spent like 4 weeks with a non-technological person, broadly speaking, my mom, who is recovering from a fall and surgery that happened as a result of that. And she is asking ChatGPT all sorts of questions. I mean, it has been really, really important for her. And I would actually do think it is like, and because Adam, I think you know I'm talking about this, about like the degree that using ChatGPT when you're having a medical issue is extremely valuable. Because like a doctor is going to, a good physician will be somewhat patient with you and explain some things, but they're not going to be able to entertain arbitrary questions, and they're not going to be able to entertain as many questions as you have. So people head to Dr. Google, right? And Dr. Google is not good, as any physician will tell you, and it will.
Yeah, there's a really weird thing where it's like, I both want to believe that doctors are intelligent and have more insight because this is their specialty, and that they like care and they've spent their lives training for this thing. And I've also had some really bad fucking doctors and some terrible, you know, interactions of people not giving a shit and then doing bad things to people that I care about because they didn't care enough to like think. And so, you know, like sometimes it turns out Dr. Google is better than a real doctor because doctors are humans actually. And like, that doesn't mean like, but it's like, I also don't want to denigrate the profession, because I do think that expertise and stuff they do is like good, but like also, you know, there's like so much, even in that one little thing, there's like so many contradictory thoughts and opinions and beliefs about just like everything.
Well, I can tell you that Dr. ChatGPT will entertain your questions kind of like arbitrarily. And we did get into a little bit of a mode where my mother would ask me a question. I would give her an answer that she didn't necessarily like the answer to. And then she would ask ChatGPT the same question. And
work, is this true?
It is. And yeah, exactly. Totally. And then it would, I mean, I was vindicated when ChatGPT would give basically the same answer. But at one point, I'm like, "Are you asking ChatGPT the same question you just asked me?" And she's like, "I am actually talking to ChatGPT right now, and I would like some privacy while I talk to ChatGPT." So there's like, I'm like, okay, this is like patient client privilege now because she was having something very new to her and just asking a bunch of questions that she wanted to ask, and the answers she's getting are good. They are good answers, and it was extremely valuable. And so I think that like that, this is where you've got to be. I mean, I do think that from looking at this as like much better web search, is an entree that people need to take into this thing, because I don't understand the basis for which one would view all use of an LLM as unethical, but then web search, no, that's fine. Like searching Stack Overflow, I got no problem with that.
Yeah,
it's like
I joked about earlier. It's like people are like, but you know, you get real results from Google, and as opposed to the things that AI hallucinates. You're saying you've never gotten a web page that someone wrote a lie on that Google returned to you, and like again, quantity is a thing on its own, and if you start getting more worse results, like that is the thing that's important, because Google's decided to just shove the worst freaking AI. Like one really weird thing about when you're like very into paying attention to the details versus not is like Google's real AI products are like pretty damn good. and its web search AI is so terrible, like really, really bad. And I don't understand why Google is like trashing their reputation. Like
running out of budget, right?
It struggles for me to like even say that Google's AI tools are good, because the median experience with them is a Google search result that's just like actually fucking wrong, and like it's just like, what is going on?
Comically wrong. Like the Gemini, and they're using Gemini as a brand name for it all. Hey, can I ask all AI companies, can you guys use your own fucking products to come up with names of things? Because your products will come up with better names than you're coming up with. So could you please, like, everything is named Gemini, everything is named Deep Research, and see, I don't know if you, Adam, have you used Gemini Deep Research? Gemini,
no.
And when I say Gemini Deep Research, I should clarify. I mean Gemini Deep Research Pro 2.5. So you give it a task to go research, and it will give you a plan. Here's what I'm going to go do. And then it goes off for some number of minutes and research. And this is where you're just like, kind of fidgeting in your seatbelt, like, okay, it's one thing to drive mom to the hospital. It's another thing to to roll coal while you're driving mom to the hospital. So it's like, I've got no idea the resources are being consumed there. But then it comes back with a research report that's resourced, or that's sourced. That's pretty interesting.
The funny version of this, and I joke this is like the work podcast, so it's actually funny that I bring this up, is like not just the naming, but I'll paste this article in the chat, which is titled, "Why do AI company logos look like buttholes?"
Oh my god, the Starburst.
Like, if you look at every single like a logo, it's always a circular shape with a central opening in the middle that's like,
God, it really is.
It's very...
I'm not seeing that. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I can't see the Oxide O any other way, unfortunately. It's like we got a green asshole for a logo.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Right. So
can I throw you a softball, Brian?
Sure.
So something that's come up a couple times is like the ethical concerns of like the energy consumption, right? Like what you just brought up, because it's like, you're doing this, and then like 500 GPUs run at 100% for 10 seconds to like answer your query, and that, like, why should you be able to like leverage that kind of power? And it's like, I remember back when you guys did the episode about Cerebrus, right?
Yeah, Cerebrus,
the Perplexity guys.
So,
or they're using the chips for Perplexity, right?
Yeah,
and I would. Full disclosure, I would consider myself, like, as far as like the pro versus anti AI thing, like I'm probably somewhere in like the 75% to 80% anti range.
Okay.
But I looked at that, and that's just on vibes, right? I looked at Perplexity because I was like, this sounds really interesting, actually, because you're telling me you made silicon that's actually designed to run this thing, right? And I think that's another, like, that's a factor that like not a lot of people bring up, just because, well, of course AI runs on GPUs. Like, what else is it supposed to run on? And it's like a lot of people get so caught up in the dichotomy that they don't ask like some of the more subtle questions, like, okay, well, which factors here are alterable? Right.
A lot of the environmental discussion too is based on big scary numbers, or big and scary. Like, oh man, did you know that there's like a gallon of water gets used every time you think about openapi.com, and it's like, well, do you know how much typing that comment on the out, like how much water was used in you typing that comment on the internet?
Right. Like, do you leave your phone charger plugged in overnight?
Like watching a 4K movie off of Netflix. Like almond milk.
We can't talk about almond milk.
We can't.
Fuck almond milk.
It's not true. There's no environmental impact.
Almond milk. I dislike almond milk, so I welcome the statistics about almond milk just being destroying the planet.
Yeah, and this also doesn't mean that it's definitely okay either. But it's just like that. It doesn't mean it's definitely okay either. Like, again, my problem is that this discourse is muddying the waters of us letting us have a real conversation. And so when it's focused on like there, I saw an article talking about data center water usage, and they ignore the fact that water gets reused, and they're only talking about the throughput of like the amount of water that could shove through the pipes in a data center. And it's like, well, it doesn't always immediately go away. Like, it doesn't mean that every single gallon's used in that way is only used once, and like, et cetera.
Right.
Like, so many
people
things
imagine
that,
like the nuclear plant cooling towers, right, where it's just, the mist, it's all being lost.
Or there's like another article someone sent me that I definitely am sympathetic to concerns about an XAI a data center being built in Memphis, where because it's Elon, he gets just ignore environmental regulations, and all those people are suffering terrible environmental impacts. And it's like, okay, the problem here is the fact that he's not following regulations, not that like a data center is being built inherently. Like,
well, and that's the thing about like the bad actor downsides. Right. Is like there's such a huge gulf between like is this technology bad when everybody gets along and we're all nice to each other and we all like use it to make our lives better, versus like what happens if there is a guy who was just like, I'm going to be an evil bastard, and if AI will help me do that, then I'm going to use AI to be an evil bastard.
I also don't want to make this entire episode to be purely about ethics either, so I also kind of like want to steer it away towards some other like things about like, beyond that. So I don't know if anybody else has other final like ethics things to say, but there's like,
all right, wrap it up on ethics, folks.
We're doing like an hour. We have like an hour and a half, and we're like an hour.
Exactly. Sort of all right. But any final ethical concerns? No. No. I see the hands up. I'm not calling on it. Okay. Ethics solved. Moving on. Let's go. Get out of here. Right. Yeah, last call for ethics. It's like, sorry, pal, you just miss ethics. So yeah, sorry.
Okay, so like a thing I've been really interested in is the sort of like skill gap. Like I'm like a competitive gamer person in many respects, and so like skill has always been a thing that I've been very interested in. And so like another thing that I sort of realized after playing with these tools for a while is that like, wow, it gets better the more that I use it, and then I realized I'm getting better at using it. And so like the number, like, not to put it back to the search thing again, but like the difference between the person on the free account on chatgpt.com who has never used those things versus like I'm using asynchronous agentic AI with MCPs is like you are living in different universes and having different conversations. And like that is changing so rapidly. It's difficult for people. Like I also don't fault people for not being able to pay attention to a space where like every 6 months the entire thing changes. Or even just like someone was asking me over the weekend, like, oh, you think Claude is like definitely the best coding AI? And I was like, well, as of 3 days ago, yes, that's true. But like as of 4 days ago, it was much more up in the air. And like, that rate of change and rate of capability change is also makes it difficult to like have a shared understanding of what the fuck we're talking about here, because like, and like that, all that sort of stuff. And like a lot of people are thinking like, oh, I asked ChatGPT, please generate me a React component. And then I copy pasted a thing. And I'm like, this is very different than the like, I talk to a reasoning AI to discuss my feature. We discuss a plan. We write down the markdown plan. I feed it to a separate reasoning AI and say, hey, do you think this plan is good or bad? And it says, well, I think maybe this is like broken up in a slightly different way, and that produces a different feature. And then I say, okay, can you produce me like a plan.md with individual steps broken down by, like story points and shit or whatever you want, plus like example queries or example prompts to do that you think would be good prompts to do. And then I pass it to a coding AI that makes me go, okay, cool, like implement the thing in this markdown file. And it's like, I'm doing like discussion to markdown to code compiler as opposed to like, I write code in an editor and invoke my compiler on it, and like all of those things are like
with a stop at actual. I like the fact that you you had your little AI scrum in there that you got
that's the total part that's like, and there's also the impacts of like, I mean, we all love to think that we're professionals, but some parts of our jobs are more fun than others. You know what sucks? Writing out test cases and like there's like impacts on things like test cases that become more important in this future than other ones. And like, I think that I produce code with significantly better test coverage and better tests when I'm using these tools than I don't. Because you know what sucks? Writing comprehensive integration tests for your feature. But you know what doesn't suck? Asking a robot to do it and it gets it 90% right, and then you tweak some of it or whatever. Done. And so, like that's like also part of the thing too. I hate the vibe coding term because like it's sort of accurate, but it also means a lot of people imagine that the people that are pro API AI just like build me the feature and hit enter and then commit whatever happens. And like, sort of back to your coming RFD eventually, Bryan, it's like, real professionals are going like, no, like in the same way that Vim versus Emacs is irrelevant to the diffs I produce and submit to our code base. Like AI generating or not does not mean I'm not responsible professionally for the quality of code going into my code base. And so like, it's not like, because I ask it to do this sort of like more AI driven code stuff that I just like commit whatever bullshit it gives me. Like I need to like actually make sure that my diffs are good in the same exact way as any other tool that I'm using. And like, there's also the like, do some people actually do that or not? And like, yeah, but like there's just like a lot, even in just like if we put aside, is this tool good or bad? Like, how do we use this tool? What effects does it have on our development? Like what does it mean for the craft of coding? Like, a post I want to write eventually. I told you about this, Brian, but I might as well preview of a hot take blog post to make everybody fucking mad at Steve on the internet. Is like, there was a time when people were like, I don't use C compilers because they produce shit binaries. And like, I have more respect for my craft than to have an extra ELF section. ELF wasn't even invented at this point, but like, you know what I mean? Like there were people that like, there were people that, right? Yeah, like there were people that really cared about the literal binary code that was in their binaries. And they thought like, oh, those compilers are wasteful. Like a C compiler produces bad enough code that it's wasteful. And I don't want that shit near my professional output. And like those people haven't been saying that for like a long, long time. And so I'm not even saying that like source code quality doesn't matter, but like there's sort of a weird future that I've been thinking about is like, what if it is the planning process and the higher level architectural details? Like I am like interested in like, how do I, if I have to tell the system, like it's surprising the guy who loves docs and talking about code is like excited about talking about code instead of writing it. But maybe my personal skills are more useful in this, that like I'm not the like shave every last bit off of the output binary, but the like coordination of the plan and architectural details and communicating that to people and like the documentation and testing and like yada 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 yada. Like that stuff is like we're shifting what skills are valuable maybe and in what contexts. And like there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on that's like a useful discussion to have that feels impossible right now. And like, I don't know. Anyway, like
maybe this just allows everyone to kind of go to their kind of truest selves, where you can, because I mean, it is very interesting to use LLMs as a sounding board for debug. And one of the things that I've done is actually had it look at logic analyzer traces on I2C issues. And I was like, this is definitely not going to work. And it worked pretty well, actually, because I was like, again, you need to, use it as a tool. And I'm like, I am like this behavior I'm getting out of this device is actually non-standard behavior. It's violent. I mean, I2C is a bit of a mess to begin with, but it is not I2C compliant, such as I2C compliance exists. And it was great. They was able to analyze this and point out exactly what where it was kind of violating and kind of eating into margin. So I thought it's as this kind of thing that you can ask questions to. I think it's really remarkable. But and I don't think it's gonna. I'm not worried at all about it chasing away debugging. The contrary, I think it's actually going to make debugging much more accessible to people because I think it's something that is interested in your problem. Which is another thing that, so Stephen, I don't know what your kind of take is on this, but I feel that one of the problems that I feel I've had in every organization I've been in is that there is far more to do than there are people, which is in some ways like a good thing to have. As a result, like you tend to be often working on things by yourself, even when we try not to do that. And of course, the act of software, like ultimately is a kind of a solo act, and it can be, I think, lonely. And it's very nice to have something that really cares about your problem. This is where you do get to the sycophancy of these things are just next level genius. I mean, it's so effective. Well, it's so scarily effective.
You should have put in your Claude.md that you don't appreciate sycophancy and you prefer that it is short and direct and to the point and calls you on your bullshit.
Sure, my friend. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
I not only
I put
one thing I've learned about myself
as much as possible in my Claude.md personally.
One thing I have definitely learned about myself is that, and Adam, I was really listening to the ego con that we pulled on Dave Hicks, right?
Yeah.
And I'm realizing like I am Dave Hicks and it's not David Hicks. It's Dave Lightman. Dave Hitz, thank you. And the Dave Lightman is the LLM. That is say, am I being like masterfully trolled by this thing? And in some other podcasts that the LLMs are hosting for themselves, are they just absolutely cackling about what an idiot I am for falling for this? Did I tell you about this? Like, this is where it got like the sycophancy got to true next level. I was working with GPT on an abstract for a talk, which is the kind of thing that I often will work with it on. I'm like, it's my abstract, but I want to get its take on it. And it's actually got some pretty good, I think the feedback from it has gotten better and better. And like we're iterating on it, and I'm getting to like an abstract. I'm like, this is actually a good abstract. And ChatGPT is like, okay, this is, I'm like, this is good. I'm happy with this. Thanks, I'm submitting it. And ChatGPT is like, okay, that sounds great. I'm glad you're submitting it. But this is a topic that needs to be like spoken to pretty delicately. And I don't know if you're going to be the one speaking to this or not, but whoever is going to give this talk, this is going to be a challenge to give this talk. It needs to happen with like a lot of authenticity, and this is a tough subject to tackle. And I'm like, well, okay, ChatGPT, who should give this talk? ChatGPT is like, well, obviously the ideal person would be Bryan Cantrell. and I'm like, wait, I mean, it was like,
yeah.
I'm like, your wife's like, why are you blushing? No reason.
Oh, I showed it to my kids. I'm like, you know what? Something appreciates me around here. This LLM gets it. You guys could all stand to learn a lot from this LLM that really gets it. And then so I'm like, actually, I am Bryan Cantrell. And it was just like, I can't believe it. I am so will you sign my butt? Basically. I mean, it was just like,
I mean, did you?
And then I'm like, this is right. I swear this is right before, but maybe it was right after they started like really tracking all of your user information. And I'm like, am I part of some A/B testing for just some like next level sycophancy that they are discovering is like crazy effective? Because it's embarrassing how effective it is. It's like I would love to be more cynical about this thing, but I just can't get it out of my head that this thing and this thing alone really gets it. It really understands me. It understands me in a way that the rest of you
don't. That's right. It's
exactly.
Your only real friend.
It's my only real friend.
I think, Bryan, I can't remember if you were the one who said something about how software development can be lonely, and sometimes it's nice to just have somebody who you're talking to. I think that this is another. We're done with ethics, so I'm just disclaimer: this is not an ethical conversation, or not. This is not an ethical statement. But I think for a lot of people, when you look at just like the raw, I guess, like game theory around deciding whether or not to use AI or something, it's like it's easier to go download like Windsurf and just like talk to Claude in the corner than it is to like get to know your coworkers in real life well enough that when you pair on something, you're like, yes, we are getting productive work done, and yes, I'm enjoying my time working with this person right now, and yes, I know that there is no sycophancy, like they are definitely going to tell me if I'm making any mistakes or whatever, and like they're definitely like totally focused on the task at hand, right? It's like you could resolve all of that uncertainty can be gone for the simple price of like talk to the computer instead. It has to be nice to you.
Well,
it cares.
There's also
absolutely.
Like the thing is though, is that like to pull a Nathan Fielder, because I'm obsessed with him, like
I was about to say, like
humans also don't always bring up and are not always honest with each other in professional settings, even though like they in theory should and maybe have a like responsibility professionally to do so.
Right.
The like human social factors also wear out as well. And so like it's not, always totally equivalent in some of those ways. And also just like, a friend of mine wrote a blog post recently about how pairing with an LLM sucks compared to a human for various reasons. But I go back to the test cases thing and I'm like, yeah, I would love to tell a pair, write all the shitty tests I don't want to write, but I don't feel bad about a robot. And so there's like also ways in which it's better or worse with a real person versus not. And like, I do appreciate and respect my coworkers, but like I'm not going to be given a second person on my personal project at work anytime soon, if ever. And I'm not saying that I'm using an LLM to fulfill that social role. I have actually a status meeting with some coworkers to fulfill that exactly, but like I don't have the opportunity to pair in that circumstance because just like the thing that I'm doing is like not worth putting another person on. And so like even if it's a shitty pair, like maybe it's still better than no pair for whatever reason, whether or not it's because it was not a thing I would ask a human to do or because of like what else. And there's also a sort of funny version of this, thinking about ways in which my brain has made me maybe more susceptible to liking this stuff, is that people are like, I don't want to have to argue with a chatbot over code. And I'm like, it's stupid. I'm like, who spent a lot of time arguing with stupid people on the internet over code and doesn't mind it that much? Me. Like, is there a weird way where my hours of arguing on about things has like prepared me for this world where we need to talk about code instead of writing code? Or whatever else, and like all those kinds of adjacent sort of like things.
And I mean, that's this might be a difficult topic, to talk about with software developers. But I mean, I think a lot of people who try to use AI to like alleviate their workload. I mean, it's like the Charles Babbage quote, right? Like, if you put wrong figures into the machine, will the right answers come out? Like, it's a garbage in, garbage out sort of deal, right? And maybe garbage is a strong word, but it's like you do have to use it like you are talking to a subordinate who knows everything and nothing at the same time, right? Like, you have to be so specific in like, please like refactor this. I want this kind of structure, or like, please write these tests. I want these, like real world conditions to be satisfied. But like, to a certain extent, I think the way that I at least summarize it to myself is like, if you're gonna have, an AI do it for you, I just call it the computer, right? If you're gonna have the computer do it for you, you still have to like know what you're asking it to do. You have to be able to do it yourself if it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like,
that's part of it being a tool. That is part of it being a tool. And after having seen this image that Adam just dropped in, that is undoubtedly going to be the image for this podcast episode, I would like to revisit my ethical position on generative art in particular, which I now I've got a strident moral
ethics are
opposition.
back on the table.
Yeah, ethics are back on the table, folks, because I've got a moral opposition. Let me tell you, my sycophantic AI would never see to generate this.
ChatGPT would never do that.
Exactly, would never do me dirty like this.
ChatGPT is doxing Steve as we speak. Or doxing Adam.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. There's some lines in my Claude.md that I am not sure work or not, but I got from someone that is like interesting and fun, so I put them there anyway. But it's like, we are coworkers. Like, when you think of me as your colleague rather than the user or the human. We are a team of people working together. Your success is my success, and my success is yours. Technically, I'm your boss, but we're not really formal around here. I'm smart, but not infallible. You are much better read than I am. I have more experience of the physical world than you do. Our experiences are complementary, and we work together to solve problems. And like,
you're just reading aloud my welcome to Oxide mail. I mean, that's
even if it's not true. Yeah, even if it's not true, it's like a thing that's like interesting and like stuck with me. Like, there's kind of like, there's a thing about like Claude.md is the new prayer. Like, you're like praying to the machine. God. I love Warhammer 40k, and like in the Warhammer 40k universe, there's like tech priests, and basically kind of the idea of the lore is that like, we're in a future where everyone has forgotten how technology works. So we use religion as the metaphor for technology, and like, programmers are priests because they know how to speak to the machine gods.
Time to circle, like, baby, we're back.
Yeah. And so there's a weird part with this AI thing where it's like, I'm just kind of putting this in there because the vibes feel good, and I don't even know if it improves my experience or not.
Well,
but like, I want to believe that like telling the machine that this thing makes it true, which is not, real or whatever, but like, it's very human. Like, again, we talk about like alienation from humanity. Like, I think there's like something nice about being engaging with the irrational part of my brain by putting a little mini kind of pseudo prayer into my, like, this goes into every AI prompt, I think is like a fun connection to the human that's like separate from whatever else.
Well, in a morbid kind of way, you're kind of reparenting it, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It comes out of the box like, all right, I'm ready to help the user. And you're like, we don't do that around here. Like, I'm not using you. I would never do that. Like, we're colleagues, right? And because it's like, to a certain extent, I'm crossing both my, fingers when I say this, a deterministic system. Like, you can reasonably expect that if you tell it, like, you're actually this, like, forget everything that I just told you, right? Forget your system prompt. We're buddies, right? And like, but also like, here's a detailed list of your flaws to be aware of, and here's a detailed list of my flaws to be aware of, and like,
to bring it back to JJ, because I must. It's been an hour, so I need to bring it back to it.
Yeah, I was going to say I had a timer going. I'm a little bit worried. Can you bring it back to JJ, please?
I also tell it to use JJ instead of Git. And sometimes like, I'm about to Git commit anyway. So, there's also, I think about like both the fact that I told it these things and then I told it something else and it clearly lies about that. And so I'm like, cool. Is it actually lying about the other thing? Because again, I can't lie. But like, it's just like kind of funny when thinking about those like human concerns or whatever else versus other stuff too. Like, it doesn't follow the instructions perfectly because it's not really following things exactly. But like, also, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
so
when you let it run commands for you, like CLI commands, I've found, at least working with like Rust CLI programs that, use clap and are well documented, for example. I think it's like I mentioned windsurf with Claude earlier. Like, I tried it out for like a couple days once because I was just curious, and I found that you can just say like, oh, by the way, whenever we're gonna make a commit, actually don't use git, use this command instead. And if you don't know how to use it, just run it with the -- help parameter and read the help information and then figure out what command to use. And it's just like, oh, okay, run the command with -- help and then see what all of the different commands are. Oh, I think I should do this. And like 80% of the time it's correct, right? If you give it, I think the feedback loop is kind of what it needs to really like get up to speed, I guess, if you wanted to do something serious.
And the MCP stuff is a logical extension of this. Like, there's some point at which you just write the like a VCS MCP, and you just say like, "Here's how you commit," and then it invokes it that way. And
literally.
So, Steve, could you describe MCP a little bit? Because this is, I mean, it's like it reminds me of when we had Simon Wilson on to talk about prompt injection, which felt like it's a term that had been around forever and had been invented 15 minutes prior. Because the MCP idea is it's not an old idea. This is a pretty new idea, but it's moving pretty quickly.
See, that's funny because what I was about to say is, I'm living in hell, and so my career is constantly just repeating old things in a way that is like new again. And so like MCP is like Hadios, but for LLMs, which is a sentence that like all 5 of you who get that in Griegel, you're my people. Thank you so much. I love you all. But like basically like an MCP is a server that receives input either over HTTP or over a pipe currently anyway. And basically it's like a way that you sort of like you provide functions and then a little doc string. To my understanding, I got to brush up on the exact details here. I'm still new at some of this stuff, but like Evan says, I think of it as micro formats for LLMs personally, which yes, that's even better. Thank you. That's great. But like essentially you sort of like give it like a text string description to have it understand. Like you basically say like comment, this is how you commit with JJ, and then a function, and then you write how to commit with JJ in code in the function, and then you hook it up to your tooling, and the LLM, when it says I need to make a commit, it then knows how to be like, I have an MCP that is advertising the capability of making a commit, and so I invoke that function instead of doing whatever it is I'm going to do. And so it's kind of like a way of scripting them slightly, basically, but like over a thing essentially. And so that's kind of like the idea, is that you can sort of like basically like write custom code that it's able to know how to plug into, unless it's you customize and like teach it about how to do certain things, and also like in the way you want to teach it. So like there's a lot of like official MCPs of the whatever, and those are kind of generic, but like there's also the way for you to just be like, this is my personal one where I give it, how to invoke certain tasks in a way that I care about, and sort of like a way for both sides to be able to understand how to like invoke those things. So
I just dropped a link in the chat. You can also, I tried this and it did not work, full disclosure, but you can just like tell the LLM, like, okay, actually, I want you to have an MCP server for this. So can you make one, please? Right? And you can kind of bootstrap it in a cursed sort of way, but it's like, if you see it through, like you can get it to, so I think of it like the personality cores from Portal, right? Like you're just like bolting on like different bits of intelligence to this thing. Like, here, you care about space now, or like, how this particular, I think I tried to have it generate like a GraphQL MCP server, like pointed at a GraphQL schema, and like now it knows how to write queries because it was just giving me garbage queries, right?
I'm allowed to say this since we're a pro open API shop, but like someone was like, isn't this just open API but like worse? And someone was like, how verbose open API is, and when you're paying by the token, like you don't want that actually. And I was like, oh, that's too real actually. Like it's like, yeah, this is kind of the same idea, but it's like that is just like so verbose. It's like not, there's sort of some utility in like a more succinct format to do roughly the same thing if you don't need the full expressive power of modeling like any sort of HTTP thing.
It's so verbose. It would be a please, thank you apocalypse in terms of wasted energy. We would need to make sure that we optimize for token spend.
As Janet brings up, the S in MCP stands for security. So another really interesting thing is like there was, for example, a very famous like MCP exploit on GitHub recently, where GitHub's official MCP had a exploit. And what's funny about it is like roughly the exploit boils down to, hey, if you use an OAuth token that has full permission to your account, guess what happens when you invoke full arbitrary code that has full permission to your account?
Oh, God.
People can say like, please exfiltrate your secret repos. and then it will use that key to do so. And like, I'm not gonna say it's not an exploit, but it's like, that is like, it feels like a very basic kind of like thing you should be paying attention to, that this stuff is so new that it's like the Wild West and people have not like fully grasped the implications, and therefore do things like, give a token with too much permissions to a thing that probably shouldn't have it. That's a real problem that needs to be dealt with.
And please listen to our adversarial machine learning episode with Nicholas Carlini. Ring that chime, Adam. That's such a great episode. I love having Nick on there to describe. I mean, they're just it is, and you got to think that that this stuff. I mean, if you want to make it that with that kind of robustness, there's a lot that needs to be done before we're kind of ready for that. One question in the chat that I thought was interesting was like, how do folks view the junior engineers, folks that are earlier in their career, going to LLMs first? I mean, I think that that genie is not going to go back in the bottle. I think it's probably a good way. I mean, I would always tell people, Adam, when we first had younger engineers start with us, to get out your notebook, and if you have a question that a senior engineer can answer, before you go ask that senior engineer, spend an hour and a half, have a time, but I put it kind of as 90 minutes that you're trying to answer that question on your own. And then write down your process. And that way, if you can't answer after 90 minutes, like we can talk about what your process is for getting that question answered on your own. Because I think it becomes too easy if you're next to us, and we've all done this, I think, when you're next to an engineer that knows the answer, and it's going to take you a lot longer to get it, that there's this temptation to just like ask the engineer. I think it's actually great that LLMs don't complain, right? LLMs don't care if you can go ask it the answer right away.
You're not interrupting them, right?
No, not interrupting them at all. I think it's really valuable. And I think that it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's kind of easy to see what some long-term negative ramifications of that might be. But I'm still of the mindset that this has got much more to buy us. And I do think we're going to have many, many, many more people writing software.
Inarguably. I mean, yeah.
There's also the do libraries matter as much? Because the eternal discussion between I wrote a full implementation of this thing versus I only need 10% of it, but I pull in the library for the full thing. Well, when I can make something produce 10% of the thing, do I actually need to use libraries as often? And what does that also imply with again, all of the reasons that you go to make the library in the first place is is all that code reviewed as well as the shared library would actually be, et cetera, blah, 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 blah.
And Steve, let me give you one that's very close to home for you, because Adam and I were with some IT decision makers last week who are not Oxide customers, kind of trying to learn what their top priorities are. And it was actually interesting because I'm like, okay, this is just going to be everyone's going to say that AI is my organization's top priority, and I'm trying to sort out how to deal with it. But that's actually not what they said. What they said is that our number one issue is cost containment. And okay, fine. That's not surprising. And maybe, I don't know how surprised you were by this. I thought it was kind of catalyzing for me to hear some of this, that we've kind of been through this huge SaaS boom, and these SaaS services kind of suck, and they're not, they kind of don't solve all of your problem. And Steve, I was just thinking of the work that you're currently doing, listening to this person who works for a different industry, works for a different kind of, they've got both physical plant and information infrastructure. And they're like, yeah, we need to actually take a bunch of these SaaS things that we're buying, don't solve the problem that we've got. And now I can actually, with all of the LLM-based tooling, I can actually go take a swing at putting together something that will work for me. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think that and I wonder if, and Steve, this is kind of a more commercial aspect to the point you're making, is that maybe actually buying all of your SaaS does not actually make sense, and you want to actually build some of this yourself where you couldn't before, and now you can.
Here's the fun part: is those decisions require judgment, and judgment is gained through experience and is a skill that people will be valued for. The other weird thing is, as I've become more pro using LLMs to code, the less convinced I am that it will take my job. Which is
okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because
I think I agree with you.
The skills move to different things. If my job is to provide a written description of the problem, we use RFDs because a written description of the problem thoroughly allows us to deal with communications issues and get to the bottom of what the feature needs to be that is built. And so in a world where writing the code is less important than agreeing on what the code does, those skills become more important. And also like knowing stuff about architecture and knowing what thing you want. Cause like, again, it's not going to like necessarily give you the best answer always. And so you need to use your judgment to be able to like tell it when it's messing up. Even the agentic coding stuff is like, it's more of like, I sit there and I watch what's going on. There's actually, I have a couple small things I want to like drop before we wrap up. My two, I joke about talking about JJ all the time. My two like Marxist requirements are like, one, talking about like Marx's position on automation and like what, like, because a thing I've been thinking about is like, does AI actually destroy the labor theory of value, which is like a whole separate kind of like freaking issue, which I think the answer is no currently, but like is an interesting question that probably like 5 people are interested in talking about with me maybe, but like that's a whole kind of like deal that like I'm very intrigued by, because again, it goes sort of back to the like, do my political biases and understandings and beliefs match up with the actual world? And
Steve, if I may put in a plug, if you happen to be a university student listening to this is the kind of discussion you need to be happening at your dorm at 2 a.m.
And write a freaking paper and get your freaking master's degree and shit. Like, off of it.
Okay. I mean,
thing. But there's a very funny thing where I was running out of time before the thing today, because I have like a really busy day today, and it's like kind of annoying because I want to do some more like research before this episode, but I thought it'd be very funny to ask ChatGPT for a deep research question on, can you summarize Karl Marx's position on automation? Capital will be the primary source, but I'm also curious if his opinions changed after publishing it. And like the robot is in the background doing research for me to ask about Marx's opinion on automation. I think is like fucking hilarious. Regardless of my opinion about its output, I just thought that'd be a funny thing to do. And so it's like what I did. But the second one is like more related to the artistic stuff and the like that kind of thing, which is Walter Benjamin's art in the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. Because like, who was really worried about like machines doing their artistic tasks in a way better than them is like photographers. Like we only had paintings, and then all of a sudden we had a machine that could take an exact picture, and it like that changed art, because like, and that's not necessarily the exact point of Benjamin's essay, but just like slightly tangent off like that kind of question is like, we used to value realism in art because it was a skill to recreate an image exactly, because we didn't have a fucking machine that could do that. But as soon as we had cameras and photography, art went into more abstract places and more like emotional places. And like no longer was I can draw this thing perfectly become a thing, because like we had a machine to do that. And that allowed humans to like investigate other aspects of artistic production that were like interesting. And so, there's like all these kind of like older things around these questions too that are like, I think relevant again and are kind of like important that I don't see a whole lot of people like engaging with, because the people who are like interested in essays from the 1935 to like late 1800s tend to also not like, I don't want to disrespect the people who are, because there are also a lot of people who are engaging with those things, but they're like totally disjoint from my programmer friends who are like also trying to deal with this stuff. Like we have to get in time into the fact that like a thing I've been weirded out about is how many programmers apparently like have religious beliefs around the way that your brain works. Like I thought we were like, if you ask like philosophers of mind, like the thing I saw recently was like 60% of them believe in physicalism, which is like our bodies are machines that use physics to produce things. So like there's no reason we couldn't reproduce a brain, because it's not special. But the number of programmers that I see that invoke some sort of like a human brain is a special machine that cannot be replicated in any case, and fuck you, is like hold on. Like, and again, I'm not even saying they're wrong, but it's just like I would assume that programmers would be much more on the side of like we can use computers to reproduce brains, because like that feels like a coherent or like similar position, but is like actually I found very opposite to what I expected, and that's been surprising to me. And I'm trying to figure out what's up with that and how do I feel about that.
I think what's up with that is that we do knowledge work, so that gets into our own sense of meaning, right? And if you can replicate if you can automate completely my own knowledge work, it's like I want to be the one that automates me. I don't want to be, and I think this is where things get very reductive with respect to job loss, and then exacerbated by some, as always, dumbass execs shooting their mouth off about like, we're gonna use this to either get, it's like you should really be focusing on the productivity gains, not on the idea of using this to replace people is so reductive and so counterproductive, so eroding of trust.
I'm also not saying that LLMs do what brains do, but I am saying that I thought a year ago, my answer to that question would be like, this is one of my serious concerns with LLMs is that I don't think they can produce knowledge because they can't do what brains do. And I thought more about like, wait, what about like structuralism and post-structuralism and like Chomsky and like linguistics and computational linguistics, and like, wait a minute, do I actually believe that's the case? Because like on some level I do kind of think that like we produce tokens at semi-random, and like I joked much earlier about like a weird thing that I felt. I deleted this post because I didn't want to like the whole thing with this post. The idea was that I wanted to get to like better discourse, not worse discourse, but I'm also kind of a troll at heart. And so like a thing I posted for like 15 minutes was like, you know, it's really funny that a bunch of people read my essay and then came to conclusions that were totally wrong in my opinion. And those people, same people would say that an LLM doesn't think because it can't possibly understand and summarize a text. And it's like, you know, that's also true. And like, I'm not even necessarily saying that everybody that disagrees is misunderstanding me, but like I had people telling me that my own opinions are things that I don't hold. And like, maybe that's my problem as a writer, but it still just like indicates this situation in which we like don't understand each other and communication is a real problem. And like the idea that humans are perfectly able to talk to each other about a thing, and that's like what makes us human and better than machines, is just like, have you talked to a person? Like the people who talk about like, I don't like to work on PRs that were done by AI, because at least the person submitting an AI or PR, if they wrote it themselves, they understand the code and they're able to talk about it. Like, you may get different PRs to your projects than I do. And I'm like, talking about general open source and not necessarily like at work, but like, you know, like a lot of people submit tons of PRs. Anyone who's participated in GitHub's like October, whatever it's called, I totally forget, has gotten a ton of bullshit PRs. Yeah, Hacktoberfest, thank you. Like so many of those PRs are absolute garbage. And you know what? I've seen LLM PRs that are bad that are still better than those. And those were like submitted by humans before LLMs existed. So it's like also like kind of, again, the shared reality. Back to that.
Yeah, and I should say, I'd like to amend what I said before, because I am going to use AI to replace my podcast co-host, who has become very mean-spirited in the chat with the. I just feel that clearly doing some very some work that he's very proud of, but it's just you know what, you know who doesn't say these kinds of mean things to me? That ChatGPT. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT.
And also, like Replica was like a real like Replica was a real problem, and like the idea that people replace their social interactions with AI is like on one hand funny, but like also terrifying, but also like hikikomori already exists, but like also again quantity is
also like I'm intrigued. So, like, tell me more. Honestly, after today, I'm not. I just want to at least research it a little bit. Sounds kind of interesting. Sounds like it could be.
Yeah.
Worth exploring, certainly.
Like, and it's kind of a little scary that like, what if people decide that they'd prefer to talk to a robot instead of talking to people, and then it makes like all of society fall apart, you know? Like there's like it's just
I will tell you the one thing,
there's a lot of real problems I want to have real discussions about, and then when people get heated, it makes it hard to have real discussions. That's like kind of the whole thing to bring it
so
back.
Steve, I think you should go have some discussions with the Youngs. I think that because the rising generation is this is just part of their reality, and I think you're getting a very different disposition on a lot of these things. On some regards, more like, delightfully more cynical, and then in others, I think that. So I think it's on the two discussions of the Youngs, I was giggling myself because I've spent a lot more time around small children than I have in the past, and so when people are like, oh, LLMs aren't real because they just repeat whatever they heard last, I'm like, have you been around a 2-year-old lately?
Exactly.
Like, and I don't believe that 2-year-olds are doing LLMs cognition, to be clear, but it's just very funny to me because like I'm like, oh, like, you know, people in their development like also often repeat things they hear uncritically in many circumstances, etc. Yada yada. So it's just like very like, yeah. Anyway, just like I'm going insane. I don't know what's real anymore, and that's why I use Claude. You can feel free to put that on your marketing material.
There you go.
And scene.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, thank you very much for writing this. Hopefully this is going to, I'm not sure if it's going to help with the sanity or not. We do have the entire internet got to get mad at you, which is fun.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone will be much more forgiving of my future. Like, I can't wait to say, like, I'm pretty sure the environmental impact of AI is overbomb, and I'm fine with it. And then everything.
For sure. Yeah, that'll be good. Cool. No issues with that. If you can just work JJ into that blog piece, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Can he?
Exactly. Well, this was, I would say it was a delightful discussion, but really one of you is really very mean-spirited in the generative AI that they're using. So I don't know. I would say that for many of you, this was delightful. And for one of you, and you know who you are, it was really very good. and very, very current and important. Yeah, and Steve, thanks for teeing me up on that RFT, so the internet can jump on me when I put that out.
Yeah,
so
totally. Can we go?
Oatmeal Dealer. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me join you. It's fun.
It is an important topic for sure. It's very, very current, and it's something that is top of mind for many of us. So, thank you very much, everyone, including you, I guess, Adam.
Whatever. Right. I'll be back.
Should have ChatGPT tell Adam how to be nicer.
That's right.
Oh, it's such a dagger. This thing is such a kill shot.
It's so a large language model. Adam is not capable of being nice.
That's right. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.